My name is Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Neil Briggs with Playfair Mining. Hello, Neil.
Hello, Peter. How are you?
Very nice. Very well, thanks. Nice to be talking to you.
Yeah.
We've talked once before, months ago, about Playfair and the plan of attack. We've had results out since then, and they've been surprising.
Surprisingly good.
Yep.
They've been amazing.
The exploration.
Amazingly good, Peter.
And we have a new version of the presentation deck on the website here, and maybe I'll just jump to the last page of it that shows specifically what we're talking about.
Okay.
50,000 parts per billion in a soil sample.
An MMI reading of 53,300 parts per billion in a soil sample. One of the highest MMI readings ever recorded in the 20 years that MMI has been going. And consistent, 19 or 20 consistent high copper readings. And the people who developed MMI tell me that any values over 6,000 parts per billion copper are likely to be directly above weathering copper sulfides. This is a place that's not been explored before. It's pristine country out in the bush, no habitations, no nothing. It's just there.
Yeah. But in a historic mining district.
It's in a historic mining district, and it is 7 kilometers south of an old mine, the Rustvangen mine. But this specific area, although up on the high ground it's been explored, and there are a couple of small showings on the slopes going down to the string of glacial lakes. It is all covered with glacial till, and there's no outcrop, and this anomaly just popped up in that area, and there's nothing to be seen when you're there in the field.
Well, let's zoom in on the specific area here. So Storboren, the big hill, and you can see.
Big hill, yeah. And this is only, we have done more detailed fill-in geochemistry since this particular Google Earth image, and that's what you could see on the other, but nonetheless, it's the area with those 3 big yellow dots in the foreground of your picture here on Google Earth, those ones, yeah. So one of those
355 times, yeah.
No, that was, yeah, and that was the highest number we got on our initial pass when we discovered this. As you can see, it's 48,400 parts per billion copper, which is 355 times background. Subsequently, we did detailed work in the area and defined the anomaly, although it's still open along the length. And the number now, the highest number now is 53,500, but it's in that immediate area. You have to just close that, yeah.
I'm tempted to fiddle around and dig up the other infill MMI soil sampling that you did around here. Thank you for letting me take a moment to add those additional results, because as you were saying, it is downslope in an area with a fair amount of cover and really on the edge of one of those cards target anomalies. And again, very encouraging to see consistently high readings on the copper relative to background.
Yeah,
Again,
that's another 40,000. There's some very high numbers, and that's kind of a pain. But you can see on the length of it, the way the anomaly goes, it's still open to the I guess, to the west and southeast. It can still continue between the lines. But when we did the follow-up work, there was snow on the ground, a few inches. And so we were kind of lucky to even get back in and get it done as much as we did.
Now, I remember that there was mention of the possibility of getting some sense of lithology from the various, the full set of 52 elements or whatever it is that we have here, right? Any comment on that?
Yes, I have done some work on that a little bit, Peter. I don't know if I sent it to you, but I can. And basically, I think we've defined an amphibolite unit, which strikes up to the just east of north, heading up towards the old mine at Rustvangen. And this mineralization looks as though it's a plunging lens leading from this amphibolite unit. The amphibolite unit is defined by the MMI being high in magnesium, calcium, and nickel, and low in aluminum. And it makes hangs together very nicely, makes a pretty pattern, and you can believe it when you see it. I can send it to you, Peter, if I have.
Thank you. I appreciate all the different layers of information you've sent so far. Maybe I'll turn on the geophysics here as well, just to show people what that looks like.
Yeah, that's the mag. And you can see how overall that trend of amphibolite, or the mag is defining a trend of amphibolites heading up towards the, that would be just like east, northeast.
Yep, we're looking north here.
And we're looking almost north here. So that whole trend is these trend of amphibolites, and the Rustvangen mine is on that trend just before you get up to the road there that you can see in the middle. But it's right on that same trend. If you flatten it a little, there is this back,
Risky.
No, to the left, Peter.
That's right. Yeah.
If you turn that off, there is
you can see
cards target, right? That cards target.
That's
okay,
right.
Stop there, Peter. You see the cards target in red, and you can see a line running straight up and down through the cards target down to the bottom.
Absolutely.
At the bottom is where the old mill is. That line that you can see was the old tram line, and the mine was higher up the hill than the cards target. And if you move up there and look more vertically instead of at an angle, if you roll, that way, go. That's the old mill.
Yep.
There, where you can see that, stop. You can see, lost it.
Looking north here.
Okay. Okay, just on this one, so you can see the mill and the tram line going through the cards target, and then it comes to a small lake, and you can see all this. That's it. You can see all that sort of browny color. That's the area of the old mine.
Yeah, it's always risky.
We have not tested that cards target as yet.
Was that an access issue mainly?
We weren't sure of the access in the area, and we had 24 other targets to go, so we just decided to look at it later. But that's a target for this summer.
Absolutely. Over here on that hill that continues upslope there seemed to be a pretty interesting area. It seemed like there was some old workings on there too.
Yeah, it says Borshan or Gruva there. And there is some kind of deposit there. It is in an area of a sort of protected area of some sort. You can work in there. It's not a park, but it's this is kind of protected landscape area, so we haven't been in there either. You can get permission to go in there, but it takes some effort. And since we had so many targets anyway, we just decided not to.
And maybe I'll put on the magnetics again just to show at this.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to think that you'd have a mine located at this area with a relatively small magnetic response
it's
here.
It's kind
right?
of on a finger that comes out. If you zoom out a little, it's on a kind of finger that comes out from the main magnetics.
Interesting.
So it's in a folded piece of amphibolite that goes out there.
Wonderful.
So it's not you don't have to necessarily be right on the sort of main highway of magnetics, so to speak, but anywhere in that area.
Well, and it gives you a sense for the large search space that you had starting off with this project, and the impact that cards had in narrowing it down for you. And again, to point out that the Storboren here was really on the edges of that mag high.
It was indeed, and we still don't know anything much about the geology as yet.
Great spot with the access. The road right there is
wonderful.
And
as the trail comes in very close to there.
And there's no historic mine workings around Storboren.
No, there's nothing. Up on top of the hill, some of those other grids, there's a couple of showings on those two to the north, and that's all. Some small showings up there. No, and nothing. No sign of any work of any sort.
And the lakes here, in reading into the science behind MMI and some of the experiments they've tried to do to figure out these mobile metal ions, right? It seems like water plays a pretty big role.
Usually water traveling vertically from, down in the rocks and coming up vertically. These are glacial lakes. This was a big glacial overflow during the retreat of the glaciers about 12,000 years ago. That's when these.
So those are not particularly deep, and there's no real indications of deeper lines of weakness or faulting really, and water moving around at depth.
Not overlay, but I don't know enough about it. It's all covered with fairly thick glacial debris when you get in the valley. So it's hard to know what's in there, Peter.
Wonderful. No, thank you very much. I'll turn off the mag here and I'll take another gamble to see if I can find Kovach. It's not that far away.
Way north, right up to the north end.
Yep.
Keep going. Start slowing down now. And there's Kovach at the top. There, that is Kovach Mine.
Yeah.
And there's an old showing over there on the creek you can see there. And then we have a very good target on that grid 1. Looks strange. Anyway, we have they're just not all.
Oh, they're loading. It's just my computer being slow.
Okay, we have some good responses on that grid nearest to Kovach. It's within about 1 kilometer, and it's clearly a place for follow-up.
It seemed like the cobalt numbers were a little bit higher in some of those ones too.
Cobalt and copper, a little bit silver, and there's one very high nickel there too.
I'll admit I had some high hopes for this area off to the northeast of Kovach here with these nickel sulfide targets. And we're just looking at the copper response here, so
not a huge lot on them. On 1, 2, 3, 4. There are some copper numbers on that grid right on the river on a couple of those grids.
Yep.
But not a great deal else up in there. The geology looks interesting. The mag is quite interesting in here, Peter, and looks like it's folded somehow around.
Yeah.
See that fold? The brighter colored. It looked
yeah.
But we didn't get an awful lot in our MMI work there.
Well, and even just comparing it with that historic mine down by Storboren and thinking about, the fact that you don't have to have a screaming high mag response
No,
to have a mine.
Although there is if you look where Kvikne is, it's right on that north end of that high.
Yep, exactly right.
Right?
Yeah, right there.
So kind of hard to know exactly, but between Kvikne and our grid there, our nearest grid, you can see, if you just turn the mag off there, Peter, you'll see there's other workings in there.
Yeah.
And there's quite decent mineralization around them. They weren't mined, but they were underground and exploring there.
Yep.
There is another showing closer to our grid than those old workings. In between those two longer lines, there's a showing, but there's not very much work there.
Okay. And so that's Kvikne. And then is it Vocali that was over here, the nickel sulfide?
Vocali.
Thank you.
It's called Vocali.
Thank you.
And it's that middle grid, the one you have centered there roughly now. If you zoom in on that, on the kind of left-hand side of that, well, yes, you may be able to, there's a showing there. It was discovered, there was a copper showing found there about around the turn of the century, 1900, that century. And when Falconbridge were working around Kvikne, they went in and sampled that showing on the very last day of their field season in 1974. And by the time they got the assay results from that sample, which was a copper showing, the snow was on the ground. They couldn't go back, but that sample they took came back as 2% nickel. So they started
really
nickel, and they chased that a long way. Actually, on the bottom end of that grid, I think you can see the maybe the showing. Maybe you can see the dump somewhere around there. It's right around there. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's where
I had a hard time figuring out what was what around here, but it seems like there are some more workings in this area.
Yeah, there's some pits and on the showing is what there is.
Well, and neat again to see your sample lines that are in the area with plant cover and trees and stuff again, right?
Yeah, well, we're just off the end of where the showing is, and the showing goes on for, well, under dips down and goes for about 1,200 meters. They drilled it for about 1,200 meters.
Well, and even just looking at the topography here and thinking about, what could be going on geologically there, it's a nice area with a fair amount of exposure, rock exposure.
It's different geology than what you get in the copper areas like Kvikne and Rustvengen. The geology is somewhat different here. The mag, you can turn the mag on. It looks very different in here.
Yeah, not much.
There, see? Looks like nothing.
Yeah.
Right? It's very different. It's a different magnetic domain of some kind.
But run some IP, some electromag of some kind, and you get some response with nickel sulfide.
They've tried most of that stuff and haven't really got much responses.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a case of the lines being too coarse or something like that? And maybe
I don't know. Okay. But they have not got good responses over Vocali, which is the kind of center one of those three you can see there.
Well, and I won't try to turn on all the nickel numbers here, but I will show the Norwegian Geological Survey's records that have a bunch of different occurrences. So there's Vocali marked. Sorry, I'll get that pronunciation at one point here. And there's a couple of them there, right? And then the rest of these in blue are the copper ones. The few in green there.
Yeah. Now you see those two green ones there. That one you just clicked on now. That one is called Kaltberget, and it's just up on the side of a fairly steep hill, just the other side of the hill from Kvikne. And
yes.
Falconbridge drilled about 12 holes in there. There are nickel occurrences. We did get high nickel just off the west side of the grid there.
Yep.
You can actually see the showings on that one if you look there. They're just off the edge of our grid. There's a sort of brown area.
Yep.
In there, yeah, that's one of the showings. But the cards target was there, and we thought we'd check up the hill from it. So there's one there, and there's one in that open ground down in the bottom left corner. Peter, there's another bit of brown there. So there's
really?
another showing in there.
Yeah.
And geology, I don't know if the airborne mag shows much. So I have ground mag, and that does show. Just turn the mag on here a minute, Peter. No, you can't see it.
Not much.
There is a response. There's certainly a showing here. I don't have the all card is a different one down at the bottom of the hill, but this one, there are some numbers. We'll do a little more work there, but there's been a fair bit of drilling, and I don't really think it can be very big. It's just an indication that there's things around.
Well, and again, talking about the topography here and looking at that mountain, the hill, and wondering, post mineralization movement, things could be reoriented in a bunch of different ways, and there could be.
The mineralization dips into the hill.
Yeah, exactly. So, not maybe the priority exploration target at this point, with the orientation, thinking about that in terms of mineability. It's but if you can find some high grade, and you can talk about an underground mining scenario, right?
Yeah, we will do some more work in there, but it's not top priority, but we will work in there. Yes.
So we've got the K and the R. We've got the K and the V, and then
R is Rustvangen.
And so now my memory is failing me.
Rustvangen is the one that's 7 kilometers north of our high anomaly at Storboren.
Right.
The one we looked at that was up on the hill with a tram line.
That's right.
That is Rustvangen.
Yep. And we've got it right there.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That line in the right here, and the old dumps in the mill and everything are just, it's amazing that, on the edge of that, you can even see the old buildings.
Yeah, you can drive in there, and there are photos of it on our website, and you have some of them, I think, too. And you can see the old mill, and you can see all the foundations of the old, the still walls standing at the old mill, which is higher up the hill, up the hill towards the trees there, at the end of the switchbacks, sort of. And lower down, you just see the foundations of
Thank you.
And
I recall seeing those pictures and not knowing quite what they were or where they were.
Yeah, the one that's still standing is the old mill. That's where they milled it. They brought it down that tram line and milled it there, and then trucked it off afterwards.
And you mentioned a showing that was on the hill to the north of Storboren here.
There's one or two showings around. None of them sound exciting in themselves, but I think they're just generally indicative of that this is a favorable area.
So looking at this area again around Storboren and thinking about drilling and what next, appreciate the infill MMI soils to increase the confidence on that response. That was a high impact program. It can toggle those on and off, and you see that, not a one-off, right? And
no, it's consistent.
Very important. Thoughts on mobilization plan of attack for drilling and stuff like around here?
Get money first, Peter. Then drill.
Yeah.
Finance, then drill.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, when the other thing we have to do a little bit of chase up, and we have another 14 or 15 targets
Yeah, it's
that
true.
showed up. Not as strong as this, but when you go back in and do some detail, they may end up as strong.
Well, and it's a testament to the methodology, right? And I remember at PDAC 2019 hearing about this plan and thinking, wow, that's smart. glad to see it bear some fruit, and to give a discrete target too, right? Again, thinking about these VMS deposit types and the tonnage and the scale required, and what we're looking for, right? And the looking here, 20-meter bars on the bottom, maybe it's a 50 square meter area or something like that we're talking about.
But it's going to be, but remember that MMI only detects mineralization that comes up to surface of the rock. And typically these things in this area plunge down at a shallow angle, and you can follow them for a very long way. For example, Vocali was followed for 1.2 kilometers. There's a deposit not that far away in this same geology, but probably 50, 60 kilometers away on the other side of a big regional fold called the Chillingdal, and that was followed down plunge for more than 3 kilometers.
That one's pretty impressive too, right?
Yeah.
Did some reading about that. I've got that marked on a map. It's not on this one, but
no, it's not on this one. It's probably 60 kilometers away, but nonetheless, it's the same geology. Same.
And the surface expression
same kind
of
of
that, right?
mineralization. The surface expression is similar, and it goes. They followed it down plunge for, as I say, over 3 kilometers. At which point it was about 1 kilometer deep. So it's a fairly shallow plunge, and they followed it underground.
So vertical holes, I guess, can be pretty effective.
At least initially, till we get a feeling for what the geometry of the mineralization will be. We're confident there's some kind of mineralization here. We don't know what kind. We have lots of room. I mean, the red line you're seeing is not any property limits or anything. The red line is just the limits of the cards anomaly. I mean, I think you have the property lines on as black lines, if I remember, Peter. Yeah. So we've got a long way to go either way. We're not constricted at all by space for that.
Glad to see you stake this block to the south as well. These three claims.
Those 3 extra blocks. Well, as soon as we got this anomaly, we protected ourselves. They extend for 5 kilometers to the south.
And it's diamond drilling. I guess really there's no sense of some Scout RC stuff to.
I want a diamond drill. I want to see the rock. RC is all well and good.
Fair enough.
You don't see the structures in the rock, and the geometry of this will be structurally controlled. So we need to see that, because we don't see any rock there. As you can see, it's kind of in the trees. Yeah.
And do you have a sense for depth of cover?
Well, there's outcrop on top of the hill.
Yeah.
So my guess is it's like 5 meters or something like that. That's an old trail you can see there in the foreground, by the way, Peter.
Yeah.
That runs out to the road there. But yeah, there's outcrop up at the top. I think there'll probably be 5 meters or something like that. I'd be shocked if it's much more.
Well, thank you for indulging me with some Google Earth views here. It's been a treat building up some Google Earth maps publicly and everything for the company there to share online. And back here to the pitch deck again. As you said, finance and drill.
If you go the one back up a couple there you can see the anomaly. on surface.
Yep.
You're looking straight down on it, and as you can see, it could extend the length of it. It's not cut off on the length of it because of those black dots are our actual MMI samples that you can see.
Yeah.
The one below there with the that's how strong the anomaly looks, but the one below I think gives you a sense of a 3D sense of what the anomaly looks like and how strong it is.
Well, and appreciate that it's in a pretty gentle location, topography wise.
It is. It is.
And so this whole approach of geophysics and cards and then MMI it's repeatable, right? You've done it at a few of these targets but there's more and there's ones that deserve follow-up and stuff too, right? So
on this ground, and then who knows what else there is around. I mean, to use cards you have to have enough information. You know, there's no point doing it if you don't have a good sort of solid amount of information, and we did in this case. You know, we did.
Yeah.
Here you can see that slide there is an excerpt from the short report done by SGS. It was actually written by Alan Mann, who was one of the two developers of MMI in the first place.
Amazing that he would have a chance to see new highs in a way from results here.
He was quite thrilled when he saw them. He was. I was talking to him. He was quite happy. He's in Australia.
Yeah. And looking at
that's his app. Yeah.
And it's nice to see a few of these hotspots on different lines too, right?
Oh yeah.
You know, it seems like, okay, it's clustered right around the Storboren, but no, there are some of these hot responses to the southwest and off to the northeast as well.
Yeah. Well, you can see there that anything in red is above 6,000. And if you read his comment here, he's just talking of this particular area, 14 values and over 6,000, and many of, if not all of these, likely to be associating with weathering copper sulfides. Right?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's a great example of, you know, the science. I always appreciate this as a great example of, you know, new exploration methods. Good to see
it's a novel combination that people haven't used, and we're confident we found mineralization. We don't know how much yet. That's what drilling is for.
And I guess just to ask about, you know, across this northwest to southeast extent, right, looking at the deposits that were mined elsewhere nearby, horizontally, right? Any sense, you mentioned the great vertical extent. What about the higher grade domains, right? How wide do they typically extend, you know, horizontally?
On surface? Yeah. At Rustangen, there are two main trends, and the two together would be about 200 meters, and along the strike lengths, if you like. Each of them would be less than, you know, would be say 75 meters, would be a comparable thing to what we're seeing at Storboren.
Yeah.
In terms, if we're measuring along the geological strike.
Yeah. And it looks like these are 500-meter bars.
Yep. That's
so
right. Those lines are 100 meters apart, individual. When you see a group of lines, they're 100 meters apart, and the samples are 25 meters apart along the line.
And is there anything to say that you might get a cluster of, you know, a few of these 200-meter deposits?
Typically you do with VMS type things, and you know, very typically you do. We just have to do that. This is such early stage.
Yeah.
that it's all to
Wonderful.
play for yet.
I love it. Thank you, Neil. Just scroll through another few of the slides here back to
There
the
you can
start.
see all the other hits we've got,
Yep.
where each one of those red stars are values more than 50 times background. Everything in that table on each one of those lines is at least one sample, one element that's more than 50 times background. And we've only followed up on the one so far. All the others are to do.
Yeah. And any more thinking on the cobalt or the nickel sulfides, or just?
Cobalt is typically associated with these type of copper deposits. Typically have some cobalt with them.
Yep.
More often with the copper deposits than with the nickel. We've got a couple of nickel targets, as you can see if you look over there. One of them on grid 8 is 200 or 300 times background, as I remember. Two should be over there. It's on grid 8.
Yep.
There it is, 213. Right on grid 8, which is labeled. It's right on the edge of the grid. There's cobalt nearby there. That's that 105 cobalt. It's just a couple down from it. That's right on that same grid. So, and there's a 60 cobalt. Though that 60 cobalt and the 105 cobalt and the 213 nickel are all close together.
Yeah.
On grid 8.
And grid 8. I don't know if I have it. The cards.
Yeah, it's near the road. It's up near the road there, Peter. You may have the. I don't know.
I've got grid 5 there. I think grid 8.
I can tell you where it is. It's you passed it. Go back down. It's that group there. It's that top of those 4. That one. Yes, that's grid 8. Zoom into that, Peter, if you can. And
Nice.
the nickel, you're seeing the copper here, that dot down at the south end is copper. The nickel and cobalt is right up at the other end.
Oh, really?
Okay? Yes.
Okay.
It's not near that. Right at there. Those two, no, down below it, there. Down in here.
Yeah, there's your
there's
213
your
and your
that's the
response
nickel,
ratio for nickel.
Nickel right there.
Correct.
And the cobalt is right in around there too. Right on the end of the grid, in the trees, we know nothing.
Oh God. What an area too, right? Looking at that kind of cliff would seem to present a lot of exposure.
That'll be a structure, a geological structure of some type.
Erosion and all these things like to follow these lines of weakness, right? So, and the nickel sulfide, that's a different genetic model than the VMS?
Probably, yeah, most likely.
Yeah. So more related to these structural features,
Yeah, could be. We really don't know anything much about this. We obviously have to extend that grid. We have to extend it at the other end on the copper thing too, but it's on the same grid. But it's what we have to do.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate pointing that one out.
But you can see there's a very, there's a long sort of cliff there, and this is very close to it. It's some kind of geological structure. And then you can see where people live is down in the valley, sort of close to the road there, where it's flat and you can farm.
Yeah.
Right?
But up in the woods is where they've been mining for hundreds of years.
Yeah, since 1632.
Amazing. Yeah. Which is just underneath us here.
Yeah, there it is.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. If you turn the mag on from here, you'll see that it's the general trend goes that way.
Oh yeah, look at that. Yeah.
See the trends. So.
Interesting think about the regional geology, right? And that you might get better at having a targeting method for these nickel sulfide things too. It seems like they've been a bit elusive, not just to you guys, but Falconbridge before.
So far, yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. And these are the target areas that we've been looking at on Google Earth here in one of the slides.
And that one there marked B is in fact that one just close to Ørstvangen mine that we did not follow up on because we weren't sure of the land situation.
Right. Well, and it targets waiting for more work, right? This is.
Oh yeah, yeah. That grid 8 is in that group. You can see there's in group 2. It's the north one.
Looks like it. Yep.
Yeah, that's where it is. Okay.
Appreciate all the info on how you guys did the MMI and stuff too. It's simple and effective. I wonder, is there any comparison in the efficacy, really, like, this stuff versus regular different types of soil sampling? I guess this is just more sensitive.
It's different in that MMI travels vertically upward from oxidizing sulfides. These ions come right to surface, vertically above them. So there's good and bad in the way that works. With normal soils, if you're looking at glacial things, the soils might have been moved by glaciers kilometers. So even if you get a soil anomaly, you've got to try to understand how the soil got there and try and trace it back. So the advantage of MMI is the soil's just a medium that the MMI passes through. So it doesn't matter where it comes from. The bad side of it is that because it just goes vertically up, it just sits right on top of where there's some oxidizing sulfides. When you get soils spread out from a glacier over several kilometers, let's say, you have a bigger target. You don't know where it come from, but you then try to trace that target back to where it came from.
Well, that's apparent when you look at the response here around Storboren and the fact that you can have these hot soil numbers right here and then 100 meters away dead. Yeah,
you don't have the dispersion.
Yep.
But you don't have to try to figure out where the soils come from because it doesn't matter. And it doesn't even matter what type of soil it is as long as it's a mineral soil, not organics. So you have to dig down through the organics, and on the one below this, you can kind of see that better. The slide, this slide here, you can see you've gone through that surface organic layer into whatever. In the one case, it's a brown, a typical B horizon. In the other side, it's into a gray glacial clay. It doesn't matter. But it does matter in a normal soil survey. You need to be sampling the same kind of stuff all the time. And we do too, but the same kind of stuff just means mineral soil, not organics that you get right at the top.
Wonderful. And the high sensitivity part per billion level too.
Yeah.
Great.
So people say, well, you've got a very low and a small anomaly. It's only 53,000. Yeah, but the background number in the area is only 137. Right?
Yeah. And hence the significance of these ratios, the response ratios, and all the statistics that goes along with this. I saw a mention of some kriging methods there in Alan Mann's report, and I wonder, all the fun they have with the data.
Oh, there's lots of things you can do with it. There's a lot of data. Each sample is analyzed for 52 elements, so there's lots you can do.
Appreciate this picture on the left too. Looks kind of
That
similar
is
to the
Rustvangen
views?
mine, up on
Okay.
right on the skyline. You can see a sort of brown area, roughly central, on that one on the left.
Yeah.
That's where the mine is,
Wonderful.
and that's a piece of ore from there.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate all the science again on the MMI and all the background on the project and everything. You know, you've done a good job explaining it to the people who've been listening. And to EMX, credit to them as well for putting together this land package in the first place and making
Yeah,
it available to option for
yeah.
you guys. Well done.
Yeah, we've moved it along pretty quickly.
Well, here we are a week away from PDAC 2020, so invite everybody to come and seek you out at that event.
Yep, we will be there. Booth
Wonderful.
2353, 2353.
Yep. Always a busy spot. Run into all kinds of good people there. You know, you guys are well liked from what I've seen in the business. It's great to see that.
Okay, so what we have here is an interpretation of the MMI results in the Storboren area. We can see in red the copper anomaly, the defined copper anomaly. All the values in red are more than 6,000 parts per billion MMI copper. We've already looked at the topography and see that topographic slope down to the valley. That's indicated by the green arrows. The blue arrow is showing the ice direction, the regional ice direction, the last glacial direction, and that was, in this case, pushing everything uphill because it was coming from a big regional ice cap over by the border with Sweden and pushing out to the ocean. So it was pushing in that direction shown on the blue arrow. Now, the other thing you're seeing on here is a green area, and this is what I interpret as being amphibolites or mafic to ultramafic rocks, which are the probable host rock for the mineralization. And on the MMI, they show up as high magnesium, high calcium, high nickel, and low aluminum. And so this is just a quick visual representation to show you the strike of the rocks, which coincides with the strike of the geophysics. The mag that you see goes this way. The mapped geology goes the way of the green and goes up to Rustvangen, 7 kilometers away. So this is an example of some of the things you can do trying to interpret what rocks are around using MMI.
Thank you. And so the factor there that you're looking at, high magnesium, high calcium, high nickel, and low aluminum.
Yeah. And I think it's just indicating the rock type, the mafic. Yeah. It's an amphibolite rock type, I believe.
And do we have a sense of, we talked about depth to bedrock here, depth of cover, but do you have a sense for the depth of the rock type really? Is that just surface, the top of bedrock, that's giving some indication? There's no sense for...
These ions just move vertically up, and they can move up a long way, so there's no particular sense from this.
Yeah.
Right?
No sense of dip or plunge.
Nope.
Or anything.
No, because it's just coming vertically up.
And
so I'm afraid not.
Well, that would be asking a lot, but impressive even to be able to identify, this particular factor with these, particular combination of elements as giving you some sense of targeting on the volcanics there. Thank you. Do you have a sense for what the neighboring rocks are?
There's no outcrop anywhere around here. At the top of the hill, there are some amphibolites outcropping.
but at this case
Off
around
off this map.
Yeah, but around the volcanics here, the country rock is some kind of a granite or something.
Oh no, they are sediments. They're kind of
Right.
shales, sandstones, things like that.
VMS. Thank you.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Which
Wow.
is typical of the Beshi type of VMS. Yeah.
Well done. It's and interesting as well in this diagram to see the sharp edge of the Storboren anomaly there on the southern side.
Yeah.
So
and you can see how it's open at each end.
Yeah.
Because there's no samples. The MMI samples are marked in black by black dots.
Helpful when it comes to targeting for drilling, isn't it?
Yeah. And given that it's coming vertically, you can just sit on top of it and drill vertically down.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd heard mention of the stratigraphy getting, well, to be able to have some sense of rock types at depth, right, based on this MMI. And I'd wondered exactly what that looked like. And this is it, right? These combination of different readings that are, the different elements that are not the copper numbers to get a sense.
Well, magnesium, calcium, aluminum are all kind of representing rock forming elements.
Yeah, wonderful. Is that a useful exercise to kind of repeat, at other areas?
I will be repeating that exercise with the same factors on the other areas. But remember that it works better here because we've done that detail and we've done a big grid and filled it in, so we have a good area. When I look at it without that infill, we only had maybe 2 or 3 numbers that would indicate mafic to ultramafic rocks. So it's a function of how our sampling is.
Yep. Sparse data points.
Yeah.
With these, first pass programs.
Exactly.
But then you come back and you do the infill on the hot areas, and the confidence goes up as you're showing here. So well done. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's bring it to a close here. Thank you very much, Neil.
Okay, Peter. Thanks.
Bye.